Everett, a high school senior, expected an ordinary day when he woke up that morning, just like any other day. But as soon as he opened his eyes, he felt something strange in his body. He clenched his fists and flexed his muscles, only to realize in astonishment that they seemed to have doubled in size overnight. He rushed to the bathroom to look in the mirror. His reflection left him stunned. His eyes were sharper, his skin was more radiant, everything seemed more vivid. He blinked several times, trying to collect himself. "What's happening to me?" he muttered to himself. That day at school, Everett found it hard to concentrate. The usual classroom activities no longer interested him. His mind kept searching for the reason behind the strange event that morning. When he stood up during class to ask a question, his chair suddenly broke. Everyone around turned to look at him. The most popular girl in class, Rowan, smirked and said, "What did you do? Eat the chair?" Everett couldn't respond. He just shrugged. But he couldn't take his eyes off Rowan's teasing expression. He noticed a strange glint in her eyes, as if she was suspecting something too. Later that day, Everett ran into his classmate Beckett, the smartest student in school, in the hallway. Beckett was buried in his books, but Everett stopped him. "Hey, Beckett, have you been experiencing anything weird lately?" he asked. Beckett paused for a moment, looked Everett in the eyes, then whispered, "Yes, but we shouldn't talk about it here." Everett was surprised, but seeing the seriousness in Beckett's eyes, he decided to keep quiet. That evening, Everett, Rowan, and Beckett decided to sneak into the biology lab after school. They relied on Rowan's agility to avoid the security cameras and Beckett's intelligence to bypass the locked doors. When they got inside, a big surprise awaited them. Shelves were filled with test tubes, various genetic equipment, and files with names they recognized. Everett spotted a file with his name on it, opened it, and as he read, his eyes widened in shock. This is impossible," Everett whispered. According to the file, a biotechnology company called GenX had been secretly experimenting on students, altering their genetic makeup. The goal of the experiments was to create superhumans. Beckett, with fear evident on his face, said, "It's not just us, it's happening to all the students." Rowan was examining another file on the table. "It says here that once the experiments are complete, the students will be controlled, and these powers will be used to change the balance of power in the world," she said, her voice trembling. As Everett and Beckett tried to process her words, a surge of anger rose within them. "These powers are ours, and we should be the ones to control them," Everett said with determination. Beckett nodded in agreement. Rowan, without taking her eyes off the file, added, "If we don't stop these experiments, the consequences could be disastrous." At this point, the teenagers realized the dark secrets behind their powers and understood just how dangerous GenX was. Everett declared, "We can't let this go." Rowan and Beckett agreed, but they didn't yet know what they were going to do. That night, none of them could sleep. The images they had seen in the lab, the files they had read, and the secrets they had uncovered kept swirling in their minds. Everett thought, "We have to learn how to fully control our powers." But at the same time, he could already anticipate how great the obstacles GenX would throw in their way would be. The next morning, they met with the same determination. It was clear that they couldn't lead ordinary lives anymore, and they would have to trust each other on this dangerous journey. Rowan said, "If we want to learn the source of our power, we first need to know how to control it." Everett and Beckett nodded. There was no turning back now. They had to see this through to the end. Everett, Rowan, and Beckett knew that after discovering GenX's dark plans, they could no longer live normal lives. Each of them began working intensely to learn how to control the powers they had gained. Everett tried to understand how to manage his speed, while Rowan spent hours training to use her telekinesis with more precision. Beckett, testing the limits of his mind-reading ability, realized how these powers were affecting his mental and emotional balance. One evening, they met in the vast space of an abandoned factory. It was an isolated place where they could freely test their powers. Everett sprinted at nearly the speed of light, bouncing off the walls, but suddenly he couldn't stop and crashed into a wall. "Again," he said angrily, rubbing his head. Rowan lifted a large metal crate into the air and set it down a few meters away. "I need to focus. or this will become uncontrollable, she said, breathless. Beckett took a deep breath as he watched their training. Your thoughts are too loud, calm down a little, he said, trying to control the chaos in his mind. At that moment, the sudden opening of the factory door startled them all. At the door stood Gen X's mercenaries, armed and professionally surrounding them. Everett had to make a quick decision. Scatter, he shouted. Rowan and Beckett quickly took their positions. A chase filled with action began. Everett distracted the soldiers by running from them at extraordinary speed, while Rowan hurled heavy metal objects at the soldiers with her telekinetic power. Beckett used his mind-reading ability to anticipate the enemy's moves and warned his friends. They're coming from behind. Be careful, Beckett said. At one point, Rowan found herself surrounded by a group of soldiers. She flung objects around her to fend them off, but she was struggling against their superior numbers. Everett quickly ran to her side, colliding with a soldier and breaking the trap surrounding Rowan. We're stronger together, Everett said, supporting Rowan. Rowan, impressed by Everett's sudden bravery, nodded in thanks. Meanwhile, Beckett leaned against the factory wall, deeply engaged in a mental battle. He was trying to infiltrate the mind of the soldier's leader, learning about Gen X's plans and movements. However, this was creating a huge mental burden for him. Suddenly, he heard a voice echoing in his head. We don't think kids like you deserve power. Beckett realized the voice belonged to Mr. Huxley and recoiled in terror. As Rowan and Everett took down the soldiers one by one, Beckett confused them, forcing them to retreat. However, the number of soldiers was steadily increasing, and the teenagers realized that this couldn't go on. We need to get out of here now, Everett said to Rowan and Beckett. Rowan used her telekinetic power to open a large iron door, and all three quickly dashed out. Once they were outside the factory, they ran quickly through the streets to escape the remaining soldiers chasing them. Everett sprinted with the fear of running into a dead end, while Rowan threw objects to block the soldiers. Beckett continued to read their minds, guiding them. Turn right, they're coming from the left, he shouted. Out of breath, they slipped into the back door of an old building and quickly locked it behind them. Inside, they all stayed silent for a while, trying to catch their breath. This can't go on, Everett said, taking a deep breath. Rowan looked at him, her face full of concern. Even if we learn to control our powers, they are too many. If we want to win this fight, we need more, she said. Beckett was still thinking about Mr. Huxley's words echoing in his mind. They're trying to catch us because they see our power as a threat, he said, with a glint of determination in his eyes. At that moment, the teenagers realized something. Power alone wouldn't be enough. They needed strategy too. They were determined to sabotage Gen X's plans, but they knew they had to be much more prepared. Rowan said, we need to plan our next move carefully. Everett and Beckett agreed. Now, they were stronger and more determined in their struggle against Gen X. However, they knew that Gen X wouldn't leave them alone. This was just the beginning. Their fight would become even more challenging, and the teenagers would have to use all their strength and intelligence to survive in this dangerous game. If they're going to mess with us, they need to know what they're up against, Everett said, with determination in his eyes. Rowan and Beckett responded to his resolve in kind. Now, they wanted not just to survive, but to win. Although Everett, Rowan, and Beckett had achieved a victory in their initial battle against Gen X, it was just the beginning. They were now stronger and more determined, but they knew how dangerous their enemies were. The three of them realized they needed to come up with a plan to stop Gen X. For a week, they secretly gathered, examined Gen X's files, and tried to find the company's weak points. Rowan said, the company's headquarters is extremely well protected, but they have a weak spot: the main computer system. If we can infiltrate it, we can destroy all the experimental data. Beckett added, we might also learn about their future plans. But this job is quite risky. Everett said, with a resolute expression, we don't have any other choice. We need to finish this. After formulating their plan, it was time to act. They set out to infiltrate Gen X's headquarters under the cover of darkness. Rowan had to use her telekinesis to open doors. Beckett needed to use his mind-reading ability to avoid security cameras, and Everett had to use his incredible speed to evade enemies. However, this time they had to be much more cautious. They were up against not only mercenaries, but also Gen X's most advanced security systems. Once they infiltrated the building, Everett quickly scouted the corridors, finding a safe route. Rowan used her telekinesis to help them overcome obstacles. Beckett read the thoughts of security personnel to anticipate potential dangers. Each of them knew they could trust the others, and this trust made them stronger. When they reached the main computer room, a group of Gen X operatives was waiting for them behind the door. Everett asked Rowan and Beckett, "Are you ready?" Rowan took a deep breath and said, "I'm ready." Beckett nodded and said, "This is where it ends." As soon as they opened the door, chaos erupted. Everett used his speed to incapacitate the operatives, while Rowan used her telekinesis to slam them into walls. Beckett tried to disable the alarms by hacking into the security systems. However, things were more challenging than they had anticipated. It seemed like Gen X knew their every move, and there was an obstacle around every corner to stop them. When Rowan's attention wavered for a moment, an operative attacked her from behind. Everett noticed and rushed to Rowan's side, taking out the operative. "We need to be careful," he said to Rowan. Although Rowan was briefly shaken by the sudden attack, she gave Everett a grateful look and refocused. Meanwhile, Beckett managed to access the computer system. However, this time he faced a security protocol featuring Mr. Huxley. Huxley's voice echoed through the computer speakers. "This is a foolish mistake, children. Your power is our future. We cannot afford to lose it." Beckett felt Huxley's pressure in his mind but refused to give up. "No, this power is ours, and we won't let you use it for your evil purposes," he said, his fingers flying across the keyboard. When they finally succeeded in breaching the system, Beckett began deleting all the experimental data. However, during this process, a data file caught their attention. Rowan looked at the screen and saw a list with her name and the names of other young people. "What is this?" she asked, her face a mix of fear and curiosity. Beckett quickly opened the file. "These are all the data on how they plan to control our powers. If we destroy this data, their plans will be completely ruined," he said. Rowan said, "Then we won't hesitate," and stood by Beckett to support him. Everett, meanwhile, stood guard at the door, ready to buy them time if an attack came. Beckett hit the final key, and the files were completely erased. At the same moment, a loud alarm echoed through the building. Rowan panicked. "We need to go now." Everett quickly moved to lead them out of the building and found an escape route. As they exited, they were chased by soldiers. Everett, Rowan, and Beckett worked together to evade their pursuers. Rowan used her telekinesis to throw enemies off balance. Beckett confused their minds, and Everett tried to lead the group to safety. Eventually, they stopped in a dark alley. Out of breath, Everett asked, "Did we make it?" Beckett, with a tired smile, said, "Yes, we stopped them." Rowan took a deep breath and said, "But this is just the beginning." They knew their fight was not over. Gen X would not leave them alone. That night, Everett, Rowan, and Beckett realized they could never return to their old lives. Their powers had given them great responsibility, and they had to bear it. However, as long as they trusted each other, they knew they could overcome any challenge. Everett said, "We haven't finished this job, but we have each other, and that is worth everything." Rowan and Beckett nodded in agreement. They were now determined to fight not only against Gen X but also against any other threats to the world. They were on the brink of a larger battle to uncover the secrets behind their powers. And in this battle, their unity would be their greatest weapon. I hope you had a good time. If you like my story, do not forget to comment and subscribe to my channel. Goodbye, see you in the next story.